Uh, Good morning, or soon to be good afternoon. My name is Singoo. I work for a small company called Kakao Corporation, as some of you might know. I'm very honored to be presenting to you, to introducing our company and our services, and special thanks to Mr. Yum and his team at Google Korea for inviting me today. Before I get started, I understand there's a lot of guests from out of the country. How many of you have never heard of Kakao Talk? It's okay, I won't bite you. Oh, everybody knows. How many of you are Kakao Talk users? Great. Okay. For the benefit of the folks who didn't have the courage to raise their hand when I asked them if they've never heard of Kakao Talk, I'll give you a short presentation on the history of our company, where we're at, and where we'd like to go. Our company, it seems like an overnight success. We came out of nowhere, but actually our company is 6 years old. We started out as iWee Lab. Back in December of 2006. That's a picture of us 5 years ago. A couple of guys, I assume developers, sleeping on the couch. The assumption is they've been up all night doing coding, but they may have been out drinking and got tired and sleeping on the couch. But like all startup companies, the days were long, the nights were even longer. A lot of work went into it. The founder of our company is a gentleman called Brian Kim. He launched the first internet game portal site called hangame.com back in '98, which eventually merged with naver.com to become NHN Corporation today, which is the largest internet company in Korea. He served as CEO of the large company, but he in his blood, entrepreneurship was in his blood. So he wanted to start a new company, and so he established iWee Lab. At the time, the word of the day was Web 2.0. It was all about sharing information. It was all about user-generated content and how to provide that service to a lot of people. And so after 1 year of preparation, we launched the service called brew.com. BURU.com. How many of you have heard of that service? No one. Yes, I'm not surprised because it failed miserably. It's a fun concept if you think about it. It's a social bookmarking service where the brew.com user would tag an interesting content on the web, and that would pull that content onto your brew.com page. And your followers could see that content. And likewise, you can see the people that you were following, the content that they have tagged. This didn't do very well. And then we launched another service called Wizia.com. And how many of you have heard of that service? Yes. Again, that was a miserable failure. We put a whole year of work developing the service, coming up with the concepts, and we launched that. It's a social ranking service. For instance, somebody would put up a question like, what do you think is the most influential book in human history? And people would answer the Bible, the Quran, and yet others would vote on what they think was the right answer. And it would show you the ranking of that service, the top 10 answers. That didn't do very well. And it was around that time when KT introduced the first smartphone device in Korea. At the time, there was debate on whether to just fold the company and just go our separate ways. But we saw this new device as a chance to move into a new business and succeed in a new field. And this was in November of 2009. So we throw away all the code, the brew.com code, the Wizia.com code, and we started anew from a web service company into a mobile service company. The question was, what kind of service were we going to do? But we looked at the device, the smartphone. And it was only natural to come up with a service that was related to communication, because the device itself was a communication device. And so after 2 months of preparation, we launched Kakao Talk in March of 2010. Fast forward 2.5 years, we've reached considerable success as a service company. We currently have 60 million users, registered users. And the amazing thing about this is that almost half of our registered users activate the application each and every day and send at least one message. So 26 million daily unique visitors. So it's a very highly used application. 4 billion messages being sent and received every day through Kakao Talk. Compare that with the 300 million SMS messages and MMS messages that are sent through the local telco companies. So the telco companies are not very happy with us, so to speak. We've made considerable progress as a service company. We have now, back in October of last year, we've declared ourselves as a mobile platform company, and we're implementing various other services to form a mobile business platform. For instance, we've launched a game service. Someone mentioned Anypang, which is doing very well. We've also launched a service called Kakao Story. Think of this as the Instagram of Korea. It's a kind of like a mobile photo album. You put up a photo on this application, which is linked to Kakao Talk, so your Kakao Talk friends can be your story friends, and they can add comments on this. It was very surprising to us because 8 days after launch, we achieved 10 million users. Today, we have more than 26 million Kakao Story users. So it's a very highly used service. One note about the 60 million users, I guess it is a good thing because almost 20% of the 60 million users are overseas users. And we haven't really actively marketed overseas. So without doing any marketing activity, we've reached a considerable number of overseas users, but it's in this field that we think we need to work on more. So our next challenge is to go global. And as a Korean company, we face a lot of local challenges here in Korea. And I'll give you 3 examples. First of all, the principle of net neutrality. It's not a firmly established principle, but in the US it is, and a lot of companies, innovative companies like ourselves, are benefiting from that principle. They're free to come up with new ways and new technology to offer to their users. In Korea, I think the tendency is towards protecting the status quo rather than encouraging innovation. And so there was this huge conflict back in June between local telco companies and us when we first launched our voice talk service, which is a MVOIP service. We've been working since then to find ways to coexist and cooperate between the local telcos and companies like us. But these kind of obstacles do not exist in the States. And that's one example. Another example is privacy laws. Now, don't get me wrong. Privacy is a very important issue, and especially Koreans are very aware of the importance of protecting privacy and their personal information. But the law imposes very strict restrictions on companies like us doing business that cannot be enforced on companies overseas doing the same kind of service on us. So acknowledging that this issue is very important, I think there's various ways of resolving this issue, whether you want to pass laws or whether we want to do this by education or campaigns. I think we need to take a very broad view on how to resolve this issue rather than just running to the state legislature and trying to come up with draconian laws. The final example is one that really makes you scratch your head and go, huh, well, what's this about? It's a thing called mobile game Shutdown. I guess some of you know what I'm talking about. There's a ministry called the Ministry of Women and Family Affairs. And they've come up with this idea that games are bad, it's evil. It takes away time from the students. They have to study all the time. So they come up with this regulation. It's not even a statute saying that children under the age of 14, they should not be able to play these mobile games after midnight and until 6 a.m. So that is currently being discussed. For companies like us, even if we agree that is the right thing to do, to come up with that kind of regulation, we would have to collect personal information on how old these users are. Currently, we don't have that information. We only have phone numbers. But now, you know, on one side, the government is telling us not to collect personal information, but if this regulation is passed, now we have to ask our users and collect their age and you know, their address, and if they're a minor, you have to get their parents' consent, and all this stuff comes along with that kind of regulation. And so these make it very hard to come up with innovative ideas and services and impose a cost pressure to increase the cost of offering services to our customers. And so compare these kind of restrictions with our fellows doing similar services in the US is certainly a burden on us becoming a global company. So a lot of people ask, you know, why doesn't Korea have a Steve Jobs? Why doesn't Korea have a Bill Gates? And I think the president at one time asked, why can't we have a company like Nintendo? Well, you know, it's these very small but very important restriction and obstacles that we really need to work and to resolve. And hopefully one day, you know, we would have a business environment similar to that of Silicon Valley. I thank you very much for your attention, and hopefully I did a good job of getting you folks to lunch. If you do have any questions, I had my email address up there, but please do let me know. Thank you very much.